The premiere of House of the Dragon was so good that the show was renewed for season 2 just after the release of the first episode. But Game of Thrones taught us even if a TV show is good for 5 seasons, it can get out of the rails if you put it in the wrong hands. So don't celebrate too soon. Hi there, welcome to your channel. Today I'm so proud of myself because more than 80% of what I said about the first episode of House of the Dragon in my previous 2 videos came true. So before we start the video, let's just give me a round of applause. As you saw, House of the Dragon had a pretty strong opening. A beautiful combination of good cinematography, music, edits, CGI, well-made sets and costumes, and good acting performances. And thank God D&D aren't around to fill the script with cock jokes and nonsense one-liners. So without killing time, let's get to the review. The show opens with a little bit of history to set us up for the events of the first episode, and what I liked about the episode was each sequence had a purpose to achieve. Our first look at the show declares that like Game of Thrones, we're dealing with a very good cinematography, but this time with better sets and CG. Harrenhal looked as brilliant as described in the books, and the music gives the scene even a more glorious tone. The show slowly starts to introduce the main characters and tell us where exactly we are in the timeline. The first episode was full of important lines, and like Game of Thrones, which started with a scene of White Walkers, this show also starts with this line.
The only thing that could tear down the House of the Dragon was itself.
To prepare us for a Targaryen civil war, because that's what this TV show is about. Unfortunately, we didn't get an opening credits scene like the one in Game of Thrones, but I heard it's just the first episode, so don't worry. Then the show opens with a shot of a girl riding a dragon over King's Landing. As I said, each shot has a purpose, and the purpose of this shot is to introduce us to Rhaenyra, King's Landing, Syrax, Alicent, and the fact that seeing a dragon in the sky was something regular back then, and dragons stink. To be honest, I think the CG of this show is almost the same as Game of Thrones. We have some slight improvements, but it's not something that when you see it you say, wow, this looks so much better, because I heard the dragons are gonna look so much better than the dragons in Game of Thrones. Unlike the last seasons of Game of Thrones where a character decides to go somewhere and in the next scene is there, here we have so much build up, and the creators wanted to once again show off the great power of cinematography that was put onto this TV show. So we get to see more of King's Landing, which is populated with so many extras and it's so alive. We get to see more of Red Keep, and I just love all the visuals and the main tone of these sequences. Throughout these scenes, we get to know more characters, and after each introduction, we also get to see the relationship between them, which is so well done and less confusing compared to the first episodes of Game of Thrones. The first look at the king shows we're not dealing with a serious and cruel or drunk and fool character, and the entrance of Rhaenyra links this sequence to the previous sequence. The show does a pretty good job with this shot to let us know more about Corlys Velaryon. It's a very small but efficient touch. The introduction of Daemon and his relationship with his niece also is one of the parts I really enjoyed. The scene for beginners was full of new information, and for hardcore fans full of Easter eggs. So it doesn't matter who you are and how much you know, it feeds your needs. The purpose of this scene is to let us know more about Rhaenyra's personality. She is smart, but she just wants to enjoy the moment for herself rather than impressing and living for others. And for the hardcore fans of Game of Thrones, there's so much Easter egg in this sequence. The story of Nymeria is mentioned, which is rumored to be another spin-off, and we get to see one of the famous Godswood trees, which, to be honest, I didn't know Red Keep also has a Godswood. I thought these trees are only in Winterfell. Then we have more development and build up until we get to one of the bold parts of the episode, which is the gold cloaks. The purpose is to show us who's the source of the famous gold cloaks and what kind of a character Daemon is. He's not crazy, but he's hardcore and strict. Then we have more relationship introduction, and soon we get to nudity and sexual scenes, which was surprising to me because I heard House of the Dragon is gonna have less nudity than Game of Thrones, but I think the only purpose of this scene was to introduce us to Mysaria, the lady who goes with Daemon at the end of the episode. Then we get to the tourney tourney, which in my opinion is the most important part of this episode. As I said, each sequence has a purpose to achieve, but this sequence has multiple important purposes. First of all, let's appreciate how good the set, the costumes and the CG are. The scene again is full of extras, but the interesting fact is these people aren't really there due to COVID restrictions. They're not CG, but they were shot separately and then they were composited to the scene so seamlessly that I couldn't tell the first time I watched this part. Okay, back to the video. The reason I think this scene is a masterpiece is because the combination of professional editing, intense music, violence and gore wants to authenticate the famous line Queen Amma said earlier. The scene goes back and forth between a battlefield and a childbed to show us the same way warriors put their lives on the line, women do the same giving birth to a child. I really appreciate that they showed it. Although the scene was so violent, I really appreciate they didn't come out and say the mother and the baby died without showing all the difficulty a woman faces during the action. And to be honest, what happened there really made me sick. You can watch my reaction, I'll put a link in the description, and it pissed me off when Viserys didn't give his wife a choice, but he made the decision on his own to tear her body up just because he wanted a boy so badly. This shows that Viserys himself also is not a decent and honorable man and has weak points of his own. So as I said in my previous video, this show's not about good and bad. Everyone's good and caring for each other, but they make bad decisions too. Even Daemon himself has a gentle heart for his family, as you see in the funeral, and I like it when characters are complicated, not just good or bad, because this makes them even more unpredictable. About the tourney itself, I really liked whatever I saw. It had a huge improvement compared to the tourney in Game of Thrones. Everything was so well done, so many small but important details, and I really liked the idea that if warriors couldn't defeat their opponent, they should go to the end of the line as soon as possible, grab another spear and go back for another round. And when your opponent defeats you, you can pick up a sword and continue the battle. I also like Daemon's revenge from Otto Hightower by smashing his son and then asking his daughter for a favor. Man, Daemon is so badass. Another purpose of the tourney sequence was the introduction of Criston Cole. Daemon is one of the best warriors, and showing Criston Cole defeating him shows how strong and unfair Criston is. The fights and the brutality and the way Daemon was unseated and how it was shot, it all was pleasing. The tourney alone had so many small details and Easter eggs that I can talk about for days, but let's just keep it short. After the tourney, we had the funeral and the famous Dracarys line. Another purpose of this sequence was to show that Daemon is also upset for what happened, which made his character a little bit more complicated but also likable. The next important part from this episode is the scene where Otto Hightower asks his daughter to dress up and go to the king's chamber, which shows even Otto is not as honorable as we thought he is. And Daemon being right about the king being weak and those who surround him are trying to use him to their own benefit.
I see Otto Hightower for what he is. A second son who stands to inherit nothing he doesn't seize for himself.
You're weak, Viserys. And that council of leeches knows it. They all prey on you for their own ends.
Then again, more nudity and a wrong decision by Daemon that changes everything. I honestly don't understand why he did that, because he looked really sad at the funeral, but making a joke about his brother's baby that just died a day ago doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know, maybe he was drunk or any other reason. I just didn't understand why he did that. Anyway, then we have a strong scene full of precious lines and dialogues and good acting, and a few important things happened which led us to the next scene in front of the Black Dread skull. The scene includes a few Easter eggs like Blackfire, which was Aegon's sword, and for those of you who might have missed it, Daemon also uses Dark Sister, which was Visenya's sword. Another important thing is Viserys being cut by the throne, which is a sign that he is not worthy of it. Unfortunately, this detail was missing in Game of Thrones. Moving to the next part, as I said in my House of the Dragon beginner's guide video, this show is gonna have direct references to the events of Game of Thrones, and as I said in the Catspaw dagger video, we hope that this show tell us where this dagger comes from and how it got to the position of Lord Baelish. Most of our questions have been answered in this scene, and just like Game of Thrones first episode, which ended with a big surprise, House of the Dragon also gave us goosebumps. And once again, I was was pissed because of Game of Thrones season 8 poor writing, because as this scene informed us, this dagger belongs to Aegon the First Targaryen, and another Aegon Targaryen could use it to destroy the Night King if only Bran gave it to Jon, not Arya. Yeah, that once again pissed me off, but let's just move on. We've talked about that enough, so let's just not think about it anymore. Another thing that's worth mentioning is the performance of actors, especially Matt Smith and Eve Best. Looking at their faces, you can see how well they're expressing their feelings, which really caught my attention. And at the end, there's something that as a filmmaker, I really pay attention to and don't want to see unless a character wants to break the fourth wall on purpose. I don't know why in these scenes characters look directly to the camera and the take made it to the final cut, but I don't know, maybe I'm being too sensitive. Okay, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next week.